Black cherry. This looks like a lot of other leaves, doesn't it? It does. So how do you know it's a black cherry? Well, if you're looking at the tree, the bark is going to be dark brown and it's going to have furrows in it, which means it's opened up so you can see the layer behind it. And that layer behind of bark is going to be quite red in color. That's why cherry trees have been used to make a lot of furniture because of that. Anyways, so how do we tell that this is a black cherry leaf? If we look closely, we can, well, there, on this side you can see it. There are tiny, tiny, tiny fine teeth along the margin of the leaf. One defining characteristic, because there are other cherries that resemble this, and you'll see that when we get to the shrubs, is that along the back of the leaf, for about 1 inch of the margin, here, there is a brown, fuzzy hair. You can actually feel that when the leaf isn't laminated. It's quite cool. So that's the black cherry leaf. Excuse me. Again, in the rose family. So we're going to move on to the linden family now. And again, we only have one type of tree here, and that is the American basswood. Big leaves on the American basswood. I have a sample that's pretty small compared to a lot of the leaves. So here it is right here. And you might think, oh man, that looks kind of like a kidney. Well, you're right. This is a kidney-shaped leaf. One distinguishing feature of a kidney-shaped leaf is this cordate base, or heart-shaped base is what we like to call it. Another thing that you can use to distinguish the American basswood leaf from other leaves is the large teeth you see around the outside. They almost have glands right on the tips of them if you look really closely. And also it has a very acuminate apex, so that's a very distinguishable feature. And it's usually asymmetrical, so one side will be shorter than the other. You see that? This side's shorter than this side. Here's my other sample. It doesn't really do that, so there's a lot of variations in leaves. Alright, that's the linden family and the American basswood. So now we're going to look at the maple family, one of our favorite families because as being Canadians, the maple leaf is our symbol. It's on our flag, right? So we'll get to which leaf that actually is. First we're going to look at the red maple leaf, which is not the Canadian maple leaf. Excuse me. This is the red maple leaf here. And some things that will distinguish it from the other maple leaves, which I'll pull out quite shortly, is how serrated it is and how sharp it looks. That's how I want to describe it. So as you can see, it's quite serrated, has some lobes, okay, so 3 to 5 lobes. We got about 5 there. And teeth all along the margin, everywhere in those lobes. So, compared to the red maple, we have the sugar maple. We also have the silver maple. So here's the sugar maple compared to the red maple. So as you can see, let's flip it this way. This sugar maple is a lot less serrated than this red maple. It looks a lot smoother. It still has 3 to 5 lobes. As you can see, boom, boom, boom. But the margins are not serrated. They're entire, so they're quite smooth and lobed. The margins are lobed. And the third type of maple leaf is the silver maple leaf. And you might think, oh, that doesn't look very different from the serrated red maple leaf. And you're right, but then when you look at them together, you can see that there is a difference. Yeah, it's still lobed, and there's still 3 to 5 lobes, but look at how deep these sinuses are. They go right down, close to the stem. Whereas in the red maple leaf, they're almost flat, and they don't go very far. And in the sugar maple leaf, they also don't go very far. So the silver maple leaf has very, very deep sinuses. The other thing is that the back of it is silver, hence its name. So very, very whitey silver on the back of it, and you can really tell when they're blowing in the wind. So that's the maple family for you. I'll just pop these back and I'll be right with you. Alrighty, just popping the last one back into place. Fantastic. So now we're going to move on to our last family of the 9 tree families, and that is the olive family, and we're going to look at 3 samples, and I'm going to pull them out all again together so that we can compare them. It's a really great way to look at leaves, is to compare them to understand the differences between them. Alrighty. So, here we have a black ash sample. We have a white ash sample. We have a green ash sample, which is sometimes known as the red ash, because when you peel into the bark, it's actually reddish on the inside. But we're going to go with green ash. So, how can we tell these 3 things apart? Well, black ash usually has more leaves than the other 2. It has 7 to 11 leaflets, whereas the white ash and the green ash only have 5 to 9 leaflets. Another thing is that the black ash is quite lanceolate, just as the green ash is. You can see that both of them are lanceolate shaped. They both have teeth on their margins. So how do we tell them apart? Because these guys look pretty similar. And what if they do have the same number of leaves? Because they might. Well, one way to tell all these ashes apart is the size of their stalks. So if you look at the black ash, they don't have any stalks. There is no stalk. The leaf is right attached to the stem. Whereas if we look at the green ash, they have short stalks. You can actually see the leaf coming away from the stem, from the petiole. So there are a little bit of a stalk. And the third sample here, the white ash, they have long stalks. Look at how far they come off the leaf there. So you can really tell the difference between these 3 ashes based on the size of their stalks. One thing I didn't mention is the shape, excuse me, the shape of the white ash leaves. So they tend to be much rounder than the other 2 types. More obovate in shape. See how much rounder they are? Yeah. So that's the last tree family, and now we'll move on to shrubs. Exciting. Alrighty. Excuse me. So, we're going to start by looking at some evergreen shrubs. The first being ground hemlock. So, an important thing to keep in mind with ground hemlock is that the berries on it, which are bright red, can be eaten. They're edible, but every other part of the plant is poisonous. So don't eat any part of this plant just to be safe. We always say that you should never eat a part of the plant, even if you're sure of what it is. So this is ground hemlock. You can see that it looks very flat, right? See how flat that is? So the leaves on here, or the needles, which are leaves, look like they're in 2 separate sides and they're flat across. But if you look closely, which I don't think you can see in the video, they're actually whorled, which means they wrap around the branch. And it just so happens that they move off so that they appear flat, but they're actually whirled around the branch when they come out of it. So that's kind of cool. That's ground hemlock for you. So now we're going to look at part of the cedar family, which is the common juniper. One way to tell a common juniper from other plants is the berries on it. So it has these, has these bluish berries on it, and it also has, you can see that, lighter blue berry on it, just depending on how ripe it is. Another thing to keep in mind is that these leaves or needles are very pointed. They're lanceolate shaped. They get very skinny at the top, rounded at the bottom, very skinny at the top. And if you can see, on the underside of the leaf, like this one and these ones up here, there's an almost very grayish blue to white line. And that's a very distinguishable feature of the common juniper. And there you have it. So, our third shrub, and I'm going to lose track of which shrub we're on, so I can keep track now. We're on our third one, is the pussy willow, and it's part of the willow family. And I'm actually going to pull up the next shrub, which is the slender willow. So it's also part of the willow family, and we can look at the differences, because they're found in the same wetland areas, right? So this is a pussy willow leaf, and what you're looking at here, these dark green sides are the top of the leaf, so that's what you would most likely see, whereas these more silvery white sides are the bottom sides of the leaf. And that's a great way to tell if this is a pussy willow leaf, because pussy willow leaves can actually vary in size and shape very much. This is a great example. This is the same branch, and look at how small and spatulate shaped this is compared to how oblong and long this one is. So there's a lot of variation. This, we'll go this way. This is a slender willow. So you can tell that they look very different. They don't look the same. This guy has brown bark. This guy has quite yellow bark, at least branchlets where the leaves are coming off of. And a few characteristics about the slender willow is how skinny it is. Look at how lanceolate shaped that is. Super, 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 super thin. Whereas pussy willow is much wider and shorter. The other thing are these fine teeth along the margin that you can clearly see. That marks it as a slender willow. And there you have it, pussy willow and slender willow. Excuse me. Alright, so now we're going to look at speckled alder, and we're also going to look at beaked hazel too, because I want to compare these as well. Because I find they look quite similar. So here we have a sample of speckled alder, and here we have a sample of beaked hazel. No, they're not the same thing. So, how do you tell these two apart? A few things. Speckled alder, when you're at the shrub, well, as the name says, the bark is speckled. So that's fantastic. It's a good way to tell. Dark brown and speckled. Another way is if we look at the back of the speckled alder leaf, this main vein is very, very pronounced. It's like I can feel it. It's like a speed bump almost. You go right over that. And usually when the leaf is on the tree and not dried, it's very, very yellow in color. They actually used to make dye from it. So this is one way to tell a speckled alder from the beaked hazel. This is the beaked hazel. And how can we tell it from the speckled alder? Well, if we're standing at the tree, the shrub, it's a shrub. If we're standing at the shrub, the beaked hazel may have hazelnuts on it. I actually have an example of one of those. Let's get you one of those. So, this guy right here, oh, this is getting dangerous. That right there is a beaked hazelnut. So that's one way that you can tell it's a beaked hazel shrub or plant. Another way you can tell is that compared to the speckled alder, these tiny sinuses in the margin tend to be less pronounced. So see how they're a little shallower than these ones? These ones on the speckled alder seem to be more pronounced. And that's how you can tell those two apart. Alright, sweet fern. This is one of my favorites. It's called sweet fern because if you smell it or you crush it and smell it, it smells pretty sweet. And it looks like a fern. It's pretty lobed. It's a thick leaf. If you can look at the back of this guy, you can see that the top of the leaf actually curls under to the back of the leaf. One other thing I'll say about sweet fern is that it grows in thickets. So it grows a lot of it together and it grows pretty low. Okay, so hawthorn. Hawthorn, the fruits on hawthorn look like tiny little apples. So that's one way to tell if you're standing at the tree. Excuse me when I keep leaving, that's not too great. Another way you can tell is that the branches have these long thorns on them, which are, you can tell that's about 2 or 3 inches long. It's quite long compared to the leaf, right? These are the hawthorn leaves. You can see they're quite round in shape or ovate in shape. They have serrated edges or margins. And that's probably the easiest way to tell that it's a hawthorn leaf, is finding the plant and knowing what this is, which is a hawthorn thorn. The hawthorn is part of the rose family.